The COVID-19 pandemic and its economic impact have also unleashed an epidemic of stress. Mental health disorders have risen worldwide. In Ghana, one painter wants to use his art to help lift people's spirits. But COVID-19 is not the world's first pandemic. An exhibition in Hamburg documents the history of pandemics in the city and uncovers some surprising parallels between past and present. But we begin in Bogotá, Colombia, where museums and galleries remained closed for nearly 6 months. Local artists used the time to strike out in new directions. Welcome to our COVID-19 special.
Colombian artist Moyo started experimenting with new digital technologies during lockdown, exhibiting his artworks in the virtual world of the metaverse. He's actually a painter and likes to use different materials, fluorescent colors, and plastic in his paintings.
Being in isolation was like hitting the jackpot because as an artist, you need a lot of time for yourself. I finally was able to try different techniques. I experimented a lot and was curious about this digital crypto art. Cryptocurrencies were skyrocketing at the time.
The change of circumstances inspired him to immerse himself completely in the virtual world and to conceive of new, exclusively digital works.
The speed is different. Sharing a digital artwork, an NFT, goes much faster than when I want to sell a painting to a collector. I create an NFT and people can share it immediately on Instagram or view it in the metaverse.
Erika Pereira runs Casa de Mente, an art gallery in Bogotá. She thinks NFTs are a good way to market emerging artists like Moyo internationally. Unlike other digital artworks, NFTs cannot be copied. They can be sold globally like paintings or sculptures.
The art world in Colombia is quite exclusive, and so it's relatively difficult for a young artist to get a first exhibition, and even more difficult for them to sell their work. So NFTs offer us the opportunity to promote these artists internationally.
Erika is focusing on exhibitions in the metaverse. Visitors to the immersive virtual exhibition can interact with the works here. They can also buy them using cryptocurrency.
We're heading in the right direction. It's been a hot topic, and during the pandemic, a lot of Colombians have invested in cryptocurrency. There's a lot of people who already understand the system. And with the cryptocurrencies, we have NFTs.
José Luis Gordillo is a programmer. During the pandemic, he recreated many of the most important museums in Colombia and put them online. He's currently developing an app that artists can use to exhibit their works in the metaverse and sell them directly.
We created about 9 digital copies of real exhibition spaces when they were closed. Then we realized that this was still a very new area in art as well. When it all started with the NFT boom and the new digital platforms in 2021, a lot of people had never heard of it. So we advised artists, curators, and gallery owners on how to exhibit NFTs in the metaverse.
The San Felipe neighborhood in Bogotá is one of the city's cultural centers. That's where we meet Gustavo Solmot. He thinks that NFTs are a great opportunity for artists to earn more money.
There are millions of people who create great art and who would love to sell their intellectual property, their artworks. Instead, they just upload it to Instagram for likes. But the idea behind Web 3.0 is a different philosophy of distributing value. Artists can upload their work here, but they don't just get likes, they get dollars. 1, 2, 10,000, or even $1 million.
Gustavo wants to create a digital museum where works are registered as NFTs to be exhibited and sold. This way, he hopes to make it easier for artists to access the digital art market.
The Marta 247 Museum will be registered as a space in the blockchain. All the artists whose works are in the museum will be able to generate revenue for their works, and a certain percentage of the profits will automatically end up in the artists' wallets.
There's still a long way to go, but more and more Colombian artists are turning to NFTs to realize their dream of making a living from art. A dream born in the nightmare of COVID is now taking its first steps towards becoming a reality.
For one young woman in Madrid, Spain, the pandemic cast a shadow over the last few years of high school. She got COVID twice herself and had to shoulder new responsibilities. In our My COVID series, she tells her story.
It's probably one of the most important experiences of my life until now, because, well, when it started I was 15 years old only. I was expecting like this whole new life starting and my teenage years being super fun and going out a lot with my friends, and from day to night it all changed. I'm Violeta Barata Silverio, I'm from Madrid, and I had COVID-19. I didn't really have a bad cough, but I did have some high fevers and my head hurt like never before. But then the second time I got COVID, it was actually during a vacation. So there I had very bad coughs, but my fever didn't go up. So I think my experience with COVID symptoms have changed a lot. Of course, my stepdad went to the hospital. My mom was really sick. I sometimes had to go out to the grocery store and do things. Then I really felt like the responsibility of my family and basically relying on me. And there was times where I was maybe very lonely, but then I also remember that this wasn't forever. Even inside the chaos, the family and maybe the structure I even had before helped me get through it. I think the impact of COVID in schools and in education has been huge. It affected us on the way of learning. Suddenly it was all through computers, and one day we went to school and another day we stayed at home and we had online classes. I think that really has affected us, and you can see that in the results of the exams and the results of people's own experiences. Well, I have two main memories. I'd say one is my stepdad coming back from the hospital, because it had been almost a month and we didn't really know a lot about him. How was he? Where was he? We hadn't really seen him or touched him. So when he came through the door and we saw him completely okay, it was a very big relief for all of us. And I think that moment was a very important one inside the pandemic. And also, well, there's this big place. It's called the Palacio de Hielo. It's the ice castle, and we normally go there for ice skating. And I remember seeing on the news they were using it as a morgue, and that was very also impacting to see a place that would be full of fun and happy memories suddenly just used for deceased people. My lungs maybe experienced, I think, quite a hard time during the COVID, so I think that did last for a little bit, but now I think I'm fully recovered. Wear my mask when places are very crowded, but I also like to live my life as if I like to think that there isn't that much COVID around, so I can move freely and maybe go to other countries to visit my family, to actually live experiences outside COVID, not only thinking about COVID now that I can.
We'd all like to leave the pandemic behind us, but in many countries, new Omicron subvariants have emerged. What awaits us this fall and winter when colder weather comes to the Northern Hemisphere? DW reporter Hang Shun Lee speaks with immunologist Christine Falk, who says there are grounds for optimism.
Hallo, Frau Falk.
Hello, Dr. Falk. Which new variants or Omicron subvariants can we expect this fall and winter?
In many countries, the BA.5 variant has been dominant for quite some time, and it's replaced some older variants, but it's still an Omicron variant. There are other Omicron subvariants too, like BA.275 and BQ.11, which are getting a lot of attention and which may be on the rise in some countries.
Will only the modified Omicron vaccines work?
It shouldn't be a problem as long as the mutations in the variants are focused mainly on the surface of the spike protein. That's the place where the virus is changing so that it can better enter the host cell. That's where the mutations are located. But there are large parts of the virus and the spike protein that are still identical to the original variant from China. Our immune system responds quite well to the parts of the virus that haven't changed. So we still get good immunity, even with the original vaccines.
Who should get a fourth vaccine?
Here in Germany, the STIKO Vaccine Commission recommends a fourth vaccination, a second booster, for people over the age of 60 and for people with any form of immunosuppression. That includes people who are taking medication that suppresses their immune system or are receiving treatment for an illness that compromises their immune system. People under 60 with a healthy immune system don't necessarily need a second booster. With 3 doses, they're already well protected against severe disease. And of course, many people have already had COVID.
Those people have what's called hybrid immunity. They're vaccinated and had COVID. How long does that protection last?
That really varies. Since we began studying the immune response, we found that some people are high responders, meaning they have a strong and long-lasting mucosal immunity that lasts 6 months or a year. And then there are the low responders, who don't get such a great immune response. They do respond, and that helps prevent severe disease, but it doesn't necessarily prevent infection.
We've been living with the virus for over 2.5 years. How well does our immune system have COVID under control?
If you've been vaccinated 3 times, then it has it pretty well under control. As a rule, 3 vaccinations will generate a strong immune response. Your immunological memory has been reactivated. So all of the mechanisms that fight the viral infection have been reactivated. Right now, we're in a good position, and the variants we're seeing around the world are still quite similar to Omicron. As long as that remains the case, we should have good immunity, which, if need be, can also be updated for Omicron.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
In our day and age, we're lucky to have effective vaccines against many infectious diseases that once were deadly. So how did people in the past try to protect themselves from contagious diseases? An exhibition in Hamburg takes a look at the history of pandemics.
The coronavirus pandemic propelled the world into an unprecedented state of emergency. At least, that's how it felt. In fact, in the course of history, there have been numerous pandemics that claimed millions of lives, from the plague to cholera and the Spanish flu. An exhibition at the Medical History Museum in Hamburg explores pandemics throughout history and highlights the parallels between then and now.
What's interesting is that diseases themselves don't resemble one another. The plague, for example, is a disease caused by bacterial pathogens, as is cholera. What are similar are the containment measures. They were taking the same measures back then.
The Black Death Cross meant keep your distance or risk infection. When the plague hit Hamburg, infected people were kept in isolation in so-called plague houses, and efforts were made to identify potential superspreaders.
The yellow flag in the International Maritime Signal Flag System stands for Q, for quarantine. A ship would hoist this flag when it needed to be checked by a plague doctor.
The exhibition also reveals that throughout the ages, fighting pandemics has been a case of trial and error.
Cholera hit in 1892 and took a heavy toll in Hamburg. Very little was known in the city about the disease at the time. There was no awareness that it was bacterial, for example.
Early methods to fight the plague included burning incense. It was only once the city had a proper sewage system and improved hygiene infrastructure that it managed to get things under control.
You can see that every epidemic helped bring about advances in medicine. With cholera, they used a sand filter system to purify water. And with the current pandemic, new vaccines were developed very quickly, and so the medical science progressed too.
Die Medizin wieder vorankommt.
The history of pandemics is also the history of medical progress and achievement. But as the exhibition shows, medical advances have often met with resistance. There have always been sections of the population that dismiss the science, peddling conspiracies about infectious diseases and refusing treatment, as these caricatures from bygone eras illustrate.
There are a number of examples, such as during smallpox and plague outbreaks, where you see there were skeptics and people who opposed the vaccines.
So the past few years have seen history repeat itself. The exhibition in Hamburg shows that in fact we can look to history and learn from it.
You can see what measures were taken and how they helped save lives.
Abide by hygiene regulations, be cautious, and also have a positive outlook, because this isn't the last time we're going to be in this position.
That's one of the exhibition's messages. It's up to us to make the most of what we know about pandemics, past and present.
Do you have any questions about COVID-19? Our science correspondent Derek Williams is here to answer them. Just send your questions to covidproducer@dw.com. This week he answers the question: can COVID-19 increase your chance of developing a neurological disorder?
What COVID-19 can do to your brain and nervous system has been a topic of intense research, but it's one that's gotten a little bit lost in the background racket surrounding the disease. So let's look for a second at what can happen to you neurologically when you get it and why. In most people, COVID-19 symptoms will remain mostly confined to the upper respiratory tract, where the initial fight between your immune system and the virus gets started. When things generally start to get dangerous is if the virus moves down into your lungs, causing pneumonia and limiting oxygen uptake. Among other severe knock-on effects, this critical situation can lead to a kind of tsunami immune reaction that triggers a range of other symptoms, including many of the neurological ones that have been linked to the disease. So in short, experts now think that most COVID-related neural disorders are not caused by the virus directly attacking your brain or your central nervous system, but by the body's massive immune response as it desperately tries to wipe out the pathogen. As your body battles the virus, neurological effects are sort of down to friendly fire as the immune system goes into overdrive in a serious infection. That's why the most serious neural disorders are observed in COVID-19 patients who have to be hospitalized. Even after those patients supposedly recover, they remain at higher risk of developing persistent, long-term symptoms like difficulty concentrating or sensory loss or sleep disorders, and very commonly chronic fatigue. So back to the question, how much exactly does having COVID increase your chances of developing neurological disorders down the road? Well, different studies are still nailing down the numbers, but one published in the journal Nature earlier this month that worked with a data set of close to 6 million individuals in the US It came to the conclusion that patients with COVID-19 have a 42% increased risk of developing neurological symptoms in the year after the acute phase of the infection. That translates into 7% of infected patients overall being hospitalized raised the chances of developing those neural disorders. And the patients most at risk were, not surprisingly, those who ended up in intensive care. So there's little question that there's a direct connection between COVID-19 and possibly developing a range of neural disorders later. And it's pretty clearly linked to the severity of a patient's disease.
During the pandemic, mental health disorders have increased worldwide. In Ghana, one painter hopes to help people with his art. He's convinced that color has healing properties. The scientific proof of that is contested, but his enthusiasm is certainly uplifting.
Eko Grimond is in his studio in Ghana's capital, Accra. The artist specializes in colorful works on a broad variety of themes. Art has been his passion and livelihood for more than 3 decades. In recent years, though, Grimond has shifted his focus to more abstract themes driven by color. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit 2 years ago, Grimond began spending more time in his studio. He says painting is the best way to cope with worry and stress.
I don't remember the last time I got angry or annoyed or I got scared of anything. Painting takes away anxiety, the traumatic, conditions that we go through in life. That is my experience, and it keeps me focused in everything that I do.
Grimond wants his art to help people who are struggling with stress, depression, and anxiety amid the pandemic. He says it's his unusual use of color that transforms his works from paintings into a source of healing.
It's not everything that you may have to use medication, but you can also, I want people to know and understand that you can also use art to solve problems, of nature. Yeah, if I should say, yeah, can solve problems and solve even find remedies for diseases. Art is a remedy in my own way. It's a remedy for so many diseases, mental health, name it, cardiovascular issues, name it.
When they are done, Grimond photographs his paintings and processes them digitally. The patterns of color he creates are not only visually compelling, but seek to speak directly to the brain. Today, Eko Grimond is visiting Daniel Kuma, a Ghanaian entrepreneur. The pandemic has put a dent in Kuma's business. He says the struggle to keep his business afloat and provide for his family has been a source of constant anxiety. Grimond spends time with Kuma, guiding him on how to remain focused on the works of art he brought with him. After just a few minutes immersed in the art, Kuma says his worries and anxieties are relieved.
I would say that is what makes me feel relaxed. The color separations, the diagram, and the motions. The color motions. Come on. I think that's what makes. And then he's blended the colors in such a way that the colors themselves, I think, speaks to the brain.
The COVID-19 pandemic has taken a toll. Many people have lost loved ones and livelihoods, and depression, anxiety, and stress are on the rise. Untreated, these emotions can have a profound impact on mental and physical health. Psychologists say that art therapy can help people cope.
art relaxes the brain as you see the colors. Even when you are not drawing, you're just focusing on colors. Research upon research has shown that the link between the art, the imagery, the colors, and all that is relaxing to the brain, and it's helped reduce stress levels and bring about productivity and excitement.
Grimon's artworks have long since found their way into private homes and public spaces. The painter now hopes that his art will reach even more people and bring relief to their distress.
That's all for this COVID-19 special. Next week, we'll be reporting on the Ebola outbreak in Uganda and how COVID-related public health measures are helping stem the spread of the deadly virus in the country. Join us for that and more. Until then, take care.